Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Health Tech Innovation Days. Coming live this morning again from the Peninsula here in Paris. And to those of you joining us from around the world, thank you for staying up late or getting up early to be here at Health Tech Innovation Days. We have a very busy, jam-packed day 2 with rich roundtables and many international experts eager to start compelling conversations throughout the day. And your voice counts. Please join us in asking questions, sending information, sharing anything you want to tell us on the links we've got here on the screen. And likewise, of course, to remember to keep our phones on silent mode and to enjoy networking and taking plenty of coffee outside in the lobby and the round table. We're going to start this morning with our first round table here with our very full panel. We have, to open this round table, we have a leading figure from the pharmaceutical industry, Alain Herrera. Welcome. Who is joined to moderate this roundtable by Maria Souleau, European and French patent attorney. And after, we will be taking a 5-minute break, and at 9:30, we'll be moving into our second roundtable, all about disruptive robotic solutions. But first, let's begin with the life sciences cluster efficiency. Alain, Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Alison. So good morning, everybody. So we will be here to discuss during a little bit less than 1 hour about life sciences cluster efficiency. And before starting the presentations and the discussion, I would like to add to this question about efficiency 2 other questions. What have forced the science industry to reconsider the traditional business models? And what pushed them to change location strategies? On top of this, what historically define a life science cluster? Is it educated workforce? Is it venture and capital investment? Is it about centers of excellence and innovation? Is it industry-friendly political structure or institution of higher learning? Or economic development incentives, patent, etc.? So in order to address all these questions, we invited 4 distinguished guests. They will present first 2 examples of very successful clusters in the life science area. And then we will have a joint presentation about another example of an ongoing project of different type of cluster, if I can say, because as you will see, it's more focused, less open in terms of the fields concerned. And I think this will allow us to have an interesting discussion at the end. So the first speaker will be Johannes Fruehauf. Johannes is the CEO and the founder of Central Lab and Biolabs, which is a cluster which was born first in Boston, but today you are in all places, main places in the United States. And this cluster is really what we can call a generalist cluster, because you cover basically all field of life sciences. The second presentation will be by Jérôme van der Leijt, and you will present the institute, the IB Institute in Belgium, which is a second example of a very successful cluster. I think you will speak about what you did in terms of spin-off, in terms of innovative medicine development, and you will also, I think, mention the deal with a French company named Sanofi, which conclusion was the acquisition by Sanofi of Ablings. And thereafter, we'll have a joint presentation by Professor Fabrice André, the head of Institute Gustave Roussy Research, and Olivier Bogillot, the president of Sanofi France, and they will tell us about the Paris-Saclay Cancer Cluster, which is an ongoing project. And here we'll have an example of cluster, different type of cluster, as I said before, focusing on a main therapeutic area, which is oncology. So maybe we can go with the first speaker, Johannes.
Thank you, Alain. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to be part of your panel this morning. Should I push here? Oh, yeah. So I have a few slides to introduce our projects to you. I represent an organization, Biolabs and LabCentral, where we build co-working facilities for innovators in the life sciences. They are typically academic experts starting companies in either biotech or also medtech. Oh, we've gone forward. All right. Can I go back? Not with this one. Oh, yeah. I put on this slide a little wheel that I like to show to discuss the many things needed for successful creation of startups. And I'm from Germany. I studied in France a little bit, and now I'm doing biotech in the US. And I often get asked by my European colleagues, so what do we do? What do we need to do to make things work better here? And we all understand that there's excellent science happening in our local European research institutions and hospitals. But there is a big gap and we can do much better in creating startups. There are a number of things on your slide. I don't think we have time to go through them. Take a look at that. We try to work on creating the ecosystem for the innovators to lower the bars and to make it more likely for groups to be successful in this venture. All of us are somewhat called upon to help excellent science find its calling, not just into papers, but into products. We specifically focus on space and labs, and it's too much text on this, but we basically do, we create playgrounds for innovators where they can come in and find everything they need in labs, from the pipette to the sequencer to everything in between, including animal facilities and so forth. So they don't have to worry about the operations of running labs, but they can just be smart. Also, and even more importantly than the infrastructure, is that we create an environment where there are many other innovators around them, and we connect them with pharmaceutical partners and with venture capital. And somehow this thing does itself, which is fine. My last slide, if you want to show my last slide again, it's the map of our current facilities in the US. So we have a number of labs around the country. We currently serve about 375 companies that use our facilities, and we're very excited because yesterday we launched our presence at Hôtel-Dieu. The first slide showed you the historic hospital on Ile de la Cité, where we'll be building one of our clusters, and I hope that many of you will be able to actively participate to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I guess congratulations, quite some numbers. I'd like to introduce, quickly how VIB indeed, what we are and how we've tried to create a booming life sciences ecosystem in Flanders. We are somewhat different from many other organizations, but we are in fact a research institute. So we are in fact conducting world-class science. We have a particular affinity to technology. which drives a lot of the high-impact papers that we produce. But we've been at the basis of an accelerating biotech ecosystem of startups, so I couldn't agree with Johannes more, which leads to an entrepreneurial talent pool. These companies basically form new people going forward. And this attracts a growing VC landscape, which in the end is still very much needed and a fuel for these developments. And so in general, just quickly, I think, and I think the colleagues of Gustave Roussy will be well placed, you need to be top in science. Halfway is not enough. Science is a global business, and you need to be in the top 10% ranking of in your fields to be at VIB. And indeed, that also shows in the numbers. If you look at publications that are cited by our peers, VIB is doing very well and amongst very prestigious institutes, even though we are, in fact, a bit smaller. But how do we create innovation from discovery? And in fact, you can, in an abstract way, look at it in this way. On the y-axis, we have the why question, just a fundamental research looking at trying to understand a piece of, or a conundrum in biology. And then on the x-axis, you basically have the so what question. What do we do with it? Exactly what Johannes said. So going from the common man musings, I think well placed here to say, okay, the Marie Curie quadrant is really trying to understand the basic elements. This might actually already hold early discovery IP, maybe even early IP, but it's still extremely early stage. Then we move into the Louis Pasteur quadrant, in fact, because that's already with a clear goal in mind, but still the type of research needed is still very much basic. And then you move into the life science engineering quadrant, where now you turn this into products. And it's clear we basically need to create an ecosystem and a set of tools and instruments to go from left above to south below, let's say. And so we've been very successful. We've created a number of instruments to do this. I'm going to flip through this, but this looks almost like a budding yeast picture, where VIB in the meanwhile has become fore and central of a growing number of startup companies, which we start and which gradually move out. Some of the companies we created with the bigger companies around us, or at least we're very often also involved. And indeed, Sanofi is one of our partners now through the acquisition of Ablings, and we're very happy to discuss those. But also looking at the more recent companies that we've started, we've had a very fast acceleration, not only in starting these companies, but also in getting them funded and moving them through the different evolutions. And so it becomes quite a portfolio. As you can see, we have quite a number of, let's say, early stage companies. Some of them are really accelerating and taking off very fast in the therapeutic space. Some of the, another few are already entering into clinical trials. We have quite a number of legacy platform technologies, so companies that are basically based on a technology which can be applied in different disease fields. A number of agtech, biotechs as well, so we are also active in that field. And even a venture fund which has raised its second fund and is busy with the second closing. So I think this, of course, drives economy. This drives the development of the region. Indeed, if you look at the number of investments going into these companies over the total in Belgium, it's a significant proportion. So this can really pay off. Indeed, even these companies move on to go to the stock market, and Ablings was a nice example there, but also a recent one, Biotalis, went to the stock market. So, but I think I want to end with perhaps something we should discuss, because it's really an unmet need. We talk about unmet medical needs all the time. I think it's time we talk about the unmet societal need, namely the entrepreneurial talent. And we really look continuously to develop and to find entrepreneurs who want to take on some of our early stage dossiers. And a recent project that we've embarked upon, a lot more modest and smaller still than Johannes's, but I think it's a similar idea. We have been involved at VIB in making accessible, dedicated life sciences bioincubator space for the biotech companies that we have started. But more and more, we've had questions from outside entrepreneurs to can I become part of VIB? Can I become a VIB startup? And of course, this is difficult because we are an institute. So that's why we've created now what we call the Biotope, which is a shared environment modeled such as the LabCentral concept, where at least we can house these people and we can move them forward. And so that's what I wanted to leave you with a few ideas perhaps for discussion later.
Thank you. Now I think it's the last presentation. So it's a presentation we prepared with Olivier. I'm going to go through the slides. So what I'm going to present is currently a project. So it is called Paris-Saclay Cancer Cluster. So the next slide, or maybe I can do it with this. Oops. So this is a summary of the next slide. So the goal of this project is really to run translational research projects centered on patient, and we will see how we define this, run by public-private partnership. And there is a scientific flagship, and this is what Alain was explaining, is really a focused project. The scientific flagship is really to model cancer and develop individualized therapy. And the goal in terms of, I would say, industry is really to grow startup. So it's not an incubator or it's not a startup creation. The aim is really to grow startup. And the tool to reach this goal was to create a legal entity that will offer activities and services. So let's start from the rationale. So the rationale, there are 3 slides on rationale. The first one is the scientific strategy. So currently, one of the ways to identify targets and biomarker is the comprehensive analysis of samples from patients presenting what we call an informative condition, either a specific disease or exposure to a drug, but a very specific situation. And if we want to move forward this scientific strategy, we need a full integration between hospital, performing clinical research, not general hospital, biotechnology, experimental biology, data science, and drug design and drug development. So the question here is, if we want to move forward this strategy, we need a place where all these stakeholders can be integrated around a common project. The second element of rationale is that in France, and here the project is really specific to France, you will understand why, there is a gap between academic research, startup creation, and startup growth. And this is illustrated on these 3 figures, where you can see, for example, that the Paris area, in terms of publication in oncology, is very high on the ranking. When it's about patent in oncology, we go a little bit down. And when it's about VC fund, we totally disappear from the ranking. So really, the issue here identify is the question of the growth of the startup rather than the creation. So what we did some interview about some new startup to identify what are their needs in the French environment and why they did not grow or what are the limitations they are facing. And we identify 4 blocks of issues. The first one is the expertise is fragmented. So they say, if I want to make my flagship scientific project, I need to knock 10 doors and go to 10 different institutions, totally fragmented, and I need to make 10 different contracts. So this is a big issue. Second, contracting is very long, and we all know this problem. Point number 3, for a new startup, they don't have access to infrastructure, and here I'm not talking about incubator. I'm talking about high-level biotechnology for diagnostic, for tumor profiling, high-level data scientist. And last point is about the talent, and I fully agree with your analysis. Point number 3 about rationale, and that was a paper published in Science, is that the entrepreneurial quality is usually located close to university and research centers. So this is a summary of the rationale. So what is the rationale for a cluster focused on specifically on translational research in cancer? So I will not come back on the epidemiology of cancer, but there are three elements of rationale. First, what we call inductive research, meaning research based on the observation of patient sample, has become a key component of target discovery in oncology. And for this, we need to integrate all the stakeholders in common project. Rationale number two, France includes high-quality clinical research, high quality for sample analysis, and data analysis. You maybe know, but Paris-Saclay, for example, is the first university in terms of mathematics in the Shanghai ranking. Point number three, there is a need to offer an infrastructure that would allow performing flagship projects that will allow startup company to grow. So then we come to the project itself. So what is the aim? The aim is to create a worldwide leading oncology cluster. And I think Alain wants to come back on the terminology of cluster. Is it the most appropriate? We will discuss that. To speed up early clinical development and patient access. The value proposition, so there are two. First, the acceleration of the development of precision medicine, and this is really the flagship, the scientific flagship. We want to model cancer. This is the scientific output. And the second is the maturation and the growth of companies in oncology. The focus is not the creation of companies. So this project has 5 co-founders. I will not go into detail, but to summarize, there is a big hospital in terms of clinical research. There is the National Agency for Biomedical Research, INSERM. There is Paris-Saclay University, so #1 in mathematics, Sanofi that I will not introduce, and Institut Polytechnique. How it works? It's summarized on this slide. First, we perform research in technologies and applied mathematics by locating teams, and we offer services. And the services we offer are expected to cover all what companies need to grow, and this includes platforms, data, samples, expertise, regulatory help, I would say, experimental biology, and, of course, space. The aim is really to perform multidisciplinary translational research projects selected by the cluster. So the aim is not an incubator that locate or offer space to company. The goal is really to speed up the growth of company by allowing translational research project to be done, and the output is leaders in oncology and precision medicine. So really the focus of the project is not to locate company or to locate team. It's really to allow any entity that propose project to perform this translational project. So we're discussing before with Marc about Montpellier. Tomorrow, Montpellier can come with Servier and say, I want to make this project. Fine, the cluster will evaluate the project and allow it to enter. I have almost finished, don't worry. Okay. And we'll allow the proposal and say, okay, Montpellier, Servier, no problem. We offer the services to mature your project. And of course, the key element is that all the services and activities are behind a single door, because this is a major problem in France. We are massively fragmented. It's becoming impossible to knock 10 doors to make a single project. And the type of the project is summarized here. I will not go into detail, but it's typical end-to-end workflow from patient sample, molecular profiling, data analysis, experimental biology, and creation of drugs and production, and moving to clinical trials. So really the specificity of this cluster is that it's centered on the project rather than organizations. So the first building will be located in Villejuif, where there is some space, and as you can see here, the totem, the first building, is going to be located close to incubator. So again, it's not an incubator. It's a an additional facility that will allow everyone to perform end-to-end translational research project. And this I will skip because this is the timeline. And so we start now with some projects. 2022, we start building a temporary infrastructure. And the aim is to have the first building 40,000 meters square in 2026. So thank you for inviting us. I think we can answer with Olivier.
Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation and the explanation that you gave. You are indeed in front of two different models. As Johannes described, your model, it is a purely private organization. And as Jérôme described, your model, it is a mix of private and institutional initiative.
Yes, perhaps to clarify, so the Institute is basically a non-for-profit organization. We are 28% of our funding comes from the government, from the Flemish government, as an investment into high-level science, but also into economic creation. And but of course, once we start new companies, our spin-offs are fully privately funded, so through venture capital funds. So that's perhaps just a clarification indeed. So in that way, we are a bit different. I think also the situation is quite different, Europe versus the US. Ecosystem in US is still quite a lot more mature, I would say. But okay, it works on both places with different constraints, I would say. Yeah.
So, taking into consideration this fact, a question arises. What about the choice of the field? It is based on market needs or patient needs. And a question for you. We suppose that for private companies, it is almost based on market needs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I may start here. So most of our startup groups, they receive funding. They receive initial funding from government institutions. In the US, it's NIH. Here, it's other public sources of funding. That's how basic research gets built. I think what's very important is to get the translation right into the private sector. We all know that drugs don't get created, products don't get created on government funding. It's a false idea. They do get created through private initiative, through venture capital investment, and sometimes through collaboration with large corporates. And we have Olivier here to speak on behalf of Sanofi, who are one of the many active players who help support what they look at external innovation, what I look at as essential innovation. So sure, these things need to be driven by market need. It's very important that we build startups for whose products there will be a market need. Another very important point, many academics love their science, they love their solution, but there's not a problem for the solution. So let's make sure that there's actually a market need for your good idea. Work with experienced mentors, work with people who have developed products. If your idea is good, they may be able to help you find an alternative use, an application for that idea. But now you find a market fit, and only then you'll be able to build a successful company. So absolutely, for entrepreneurial ventures, there needs to be a market need. But it's also a patient need. There's no difference between the two. If there's a patient need, there will be a market need. That's the beauty of our health insurance system, that important medical needs will get reimbursed. Don't start with a medical condition for which there's only one patient. But for example, as many of you know, in the US, there are orphan drug acts and other facilitations that allow startups, and in fact, oftentimes it's a very attractive path to go into relatively narrow indications, and oftentimes these are the genetically defined conditions which we can use as a beachhead to enter into the market. But absolutely, it's both market and patient need that have to be at the beginning of an idea.
Yeah, maybe to comment on that, I think I could not agree more. It's absolutely correct. In terms of where VIB focuses, or where I would suggest indeed also the new institute would focus, it's on the quality of the science that's underlying it. That's the starting point of how you create a cluster of startups. And so it's really about, we also don't focus on all themes in life sciences. We focus on cancer, on inflammation, on neuroscience, and then on technologies, broadly speaking. And so that really gives you, let's say, the cutting edge discoveries, I call them, and not yet innovations, that you need to build a story which could be compelling to investors. But then coming from a discovery into an innovation in which an investor sees a potential to invest and build products or build companies from that, that's a big leap. And that's the essential activity of a tech transfer office. So one big advice would be really invest. I mean, in Europe, this has been for years the case. The quality, the budget, the funding for tech transfer offices, and the let's say the approach, the entrepreneurial approach in tech transfer offices is lacking dramatically. That's what differentiates us from the US institutes, where this has been a traditional stronghold. And what does it entail? Well, it entails we have 4 patent attorneys in our team looking constantly at science that is not even ready for publications, but we're trying to see, okay, what's going on? How could this be interesting? We have business development managers who interact with existing companies and gather market know-how about what companies need. We have a new ventures team, which is really expert in the meanwhile of creating, how do you create a company? How do you write a business plan which is compelling to investors? Which investors should we target? Do the investors know you? Another important part. So all of these things are at place. And then a fourth instrument, actually I can go on a bit, but is a drug discovery team. So we've installed since 2015 a kind of biotech within the institute. In other words, because like you say, drugs don't get created by a PhD student. With all respect, I think it's really a different expertise you need. And so we join up people, PhD students and academic founders together with drug discovery experts. Many of them have had their training in a number of the companies. And we basically work on these extremely early projects, which at this stage are still too early or too risky for any investor or any company to take on. But if we can take them to a certain point, now suddenly things become different. And in the meanwhile, you create attractive IP. And so this journey is really what you need. You need expertise, the right people. You need some flexibility with funding experiments which aren't necessarily valid for a publication, but might be extremely worthwhile for your patent protection, for example. So these are a number of instruments, I think, which was shown also on Johannes' slide. You really need to work on all the different verticals or angles of the problem to build an ecosystem. That would be perhaps one addition to that.
We discuss a lot about market and patient needs, and I think it would be interesting to have Olivier feeling and to understand why Sanofi decided to be involved in this project. What drove your interest primarily?
Yeah, sure. First of all, when we compare to Boston or even with Belgium, in Boston, the ecosystem now is super big and you can be in all therapeutic areas. And Sanofi is part of it, actually. And it's also the case in Belgium. When you look at the map, the worldwide map, there are among the big clusters, 5, 6 in the US. You have Boston, you have San Diego, San Francisco, New York. You have Maryland, the north of Washington, D.C. But when we looked at Europe, actually we were quite surprised to see that there is no cluster in France at an international level. and it was well presented by Fabrice. When you look at the publication in oncology, for instance, we are part of the top-notch scientists in the world in terms of publication, but very far in terms of IP, patent, and new drug discovery. So when we looked at that with Sanofi, we said, how can we leverage our expertise from Boston, our expertise from Belgium, and create something in France dedicated to one TA to start? And we looked at where we have the best expertise. In oncology, actually, we have the best expertise in the world. We looked at also at what do we need now to accelerate the development of a drug. And it's not only about science. Science is key, it's super important, but it's also related to data science, computing science, artificial intelligence, ability to make big calculation. And here, if you look at the situation of IGR next to Paris-Saclay, where you have a Fields Medal, next to Polytechnique, where you have the best data scientists, we said, hey, maybe we have to ignite something and do something dedicated to oncology. It was exactly the perception of Paul Hudson when he joined Sanofi. You know, he came from Novartis, AstraZeneca. He saw what happened in Cambridge in UK. He saw what happened in Boston, what happened in Basel. He said, that's weird that Sanofi, the biggest company in France, is not able to put its resources and expertise to generate something very important for France, and this is exactly what we try to do with the Onco cluster. And we would like to be really at the beginning. You know, it's not just signing contract. We have already contracts with IGR and some you know, in Marseille. We work on NK cell with IPC in Marseille. So we really wanted to develop something at the beginning to you know, do something different, move the collaboration at the next level. When you do a contract in an ecosystem, you know, it's a deal between two entities. In that case, we want to do something that is very similar to what you did in Belgium, starting a biotop, an ecosystem where we leverage the expertise of the different entities and we go to the next level. And actually, Fabrice, we knew at the beginning that we try to do something that is difficult. It's difficult because the competition is huge, but if we are able to do that, that's why the plan is over 10 years. I think we can probably go back in the top of the research center in the world.
Fabrice, Gustave Roussy, you have already incubators. You have a transfer organization, which aims to value the research, to help researchers to file patent. Gustave is involved in several spin-offs already. What are you expecting from the Paris-Saclay Cancer Cluster on top of this? An acceleration, additional funding? What do you expect?
So first, Alain, I think what is important to really understand is that what we are creating is a non-profit organization. So Gustave Roussy, as a legal entity, is not going to drive this. It's a non-profit organization that is offering services and activity to any project that need an acceleration. So this is very important. It's not something closed where Gustave Roussy and Paris-Saclay are going to do whatever they want. You know, it's really important to understand it's an open, I would say, building with all the facilities that we cannot ourselves pay. This is extremely important to understand. There will be platform that we cannot afford ourselves, and that will be open to everyone. So then if you ask me, then in terms of Gustave Roussy, what is the vision? And I think what Johannes told is very important. Ultimately, we will be evaluated on what did we bring to the patient. It's the only thing that matters for us. And more, and I think it's you who told that, for academic centers, product is more important than paper. So we are evaluated by the product that we generate and have the stamp Gustave Roussy. So this is why for us, it's important to have access and to develop partnership with companies as much as possible. Because we know, and I fully agree with what has been told, the key element for us is integration with startup and big companies to accelerate and put product on the market. Alone, we don't exist. We just produce knowledge and we just produce science that do not change the life of patients. So I think it's really important for us to build this partnership, and that the first step will be this totem. The second thing, if I can add, is what I've presented is just the totem. So it's the first stone. But as you can see, now in the land surrounding this place, we have been asked, oh, can I put an incubator? Can I put a 30,000 meter square incubator? And this is the cluster. The cluster is not the totem itself, the first building, is what this building is going to create in the surrounding area. And this will be the cluster. You know, it's not the building itself, in fact.
We had yesterday a round table which was dedicated to clinical trials as a care option. And in fact, what you are saying is that through this environment, it will be also a way to provide patients earlier access to new options.
Well, this, I'm not sure for Gustave Roussy to be the case. To be honest, we have access to a lot of phase 1.
Yes.
And a lot of phase 2. So I'm not sure it's going to be a major change for Gustave Roussy itself. The key element here is acceleration and growth of startup companies to offer new drugs, new devices, to offer some opportunities for Sanofi and for us to offer solution to the unmet medical need we identify. Remember, we in the flow of research, our task is to identify the unmet medical need and the problem. And our colleagues from startup provide the solution. And this is really a partnership of integrative research.
But it is right. The word is acceleration and a shift in where we interact with research. If you look at the publication in oncology, CTLA-4 or LAG-3 pathway, the first publication were in France. And the product has been developed in the US. So if we are able to accelerate the preclinical, the clinical development, actually we have a hub in oncology now. Sanofi is a hub, worldwide hub in oncology is in Vitry. So we can do clinical manufacturing. We can help to accelerate the development of startup in this collaboration with Sanofi. The most important word is acceleration.
According to what you say, we understand that this is the key problem, acceleration versus collaboration agreement with classical biotech companies.
It's acceleration and a shift in the cultural mindset. You know, when you it's well explained by this slide on publication and patent. When you discuss with the people from the MD Anderson in the US, you know, the incentive for them is to develop publication, but also to submit patent. So IP is super important because they have already in their mind the translational into the business part of what they are doing. What we try to do here is to have all the ingredients together to have exactly this shift. How can we work together with a top international center like IGR, top international university like Saclay and Polytechnique, to accelerate not only research, but patent, new drug discovery, biotech increase. You know, the model for Sanofi now is to do research internally, but also to interact with the ecosystem. We recently did 7 deals acquiring some biotech company. So we need also to acquire this type of company in France and in Europe. Actually, we did it with Ablix in Belgium. I hope that in the future, Sanofi will be able to buy some biotech company here in France, developed through this cluster.
Maybe if I can add to this, perhaps a question also to spark the debate a bit. A framework that has worked for us. I don't know how the collaboration will be shaped with you around the arising IP that you will generate together through the collaboration. I think I don't know how you see this, how it's been agreed, because this is going to be important, how to go forward. Indeed, you need to have the endpoint in view. So is it going to be joint IP? Do you work with option mechanisms, or is there just basically at the end, can this be the basis for venture creation? Those are, I think, the important questions to address up front.
So perhaps we have question.
We have burning question in the room. We start with you, Marc. Nathalie.
Thank you. I'm Marc Ichou from the Montpellier Cancer Institute. I have two questions. Firstly, what have we to expect from the government, from the national government, regional government, to create an ecosystem facilitating the creation of startups? What can be the role of the government for you? What are you expecting? Yeah.
You want me to answer your first question already?
Yeah.
So we see there's important roles for government to play. Just like if you want the train to stop in your city, you need the government to build the train station, because the baker isn't going to build the train station. But now when the government builds the train station, all people in that city can use the train. That's my analogy. We have many scientists waiting to get on that innovation train, but they need help. They need infrastructure, they need facilities that is not currently provided. Government can help with that. We have an example of very successful public-private partnership in creating these ecosystems and these frameworks. If you look at how we built LabCentral in Boston, one of our co-working labs, the Massachusetts government went in with the first money to build it because private industry wasn't going to do it. Now there are billions of dollars of money coming into these startups, creating jobs. These people pay taxes. These people pay pizza delivery services around them, and there are many benefits ultimately that come from this initial investment. So absolutely, there is a role for government to play, to be the initial catalyst in a structure that shouldn't be a government structure, but it should be a public and private partnership.
Yeah, I fully agree. And in fact, I can add to that. So every euro invested in VIB, through VIB, from the government, comes back 11 times into the ecosystem in the form that he's mentioning. So that's absolutely a crucial role. And I should add, I think it should be a long-term support as well, because we are very successful, but we've been in existence for 25 years, with 25 years of support of our government as well.
Yes.
So not 5 years.
And my second question, which is linked to the first one, is for example, for France and maybe Belgium, one of the problems is that we have the capacity to create a startup and very nice biotech, but when they are growing, very often they are leaving the country, because maybe the market is not in these small countries. So how to do, and maybe the Gustave Roussy cluster could be a solution, to how to do to keep the startups, growing startups, in our countries.
Well, we have exactly, as you can imagine, the same debate in Belgium. And I would say, I would turn the question around, because the example of Ablings is a perfect example. And we've had many in our history now. Many of companies have exited, have been acquired by bigger companies. And I would say it's the other way around. It's Sanofi moving into Belgium, because in fact Ablings has grown. The people there can do more than they could do before, because they have less capital constraints, if I may say so, in the context of Sanofi than they had before. So I would say instead of creating less companies, you should create more. Because I would also say, and in fact this might, for the big pharma colleagues, perhaps not, but the way to attract jobs and employment through big pharma companies is by creating a cluster of smaller companies with VC investments. That's where the big companies want to be. That's a much stronger lever we have as ecosystems on big pharma companies to come there, as we did with Ablings, but to stay there as well. Because big pharma companies are more and more dependent on the external innovation, which they source from biotechs. Biotechs source their innovation from academia. It's as simple as that. So if we have leverage as institutions to work on the very early start of that. If we get that going in a way that fits, that basically connects with industry and investors, we will get the big pharma companies at the end. So that would be my take on this.
Just to add one comment on the government. You know, the Massachusetts governor decided to first start by the Massachusetts Life Science Center, and then he decided to put 1 billion over 10 years. So it's facilities and long-term view. This is exactly what we need in France in our interaction with the government. Regarding the, the biotech growth that we expect in France, you know, Sanofi has put 50 million in a VC fund called Jeto. Raphael Torjman will be probably there this morning, or she was there yesterday. One of the ideas is that it's not only about a cluster, it's about the ecosystem itself. And we know, when we look at the numbers, that in terms of VC, if you look at Series C or D, it's 10 times more in the US than in Europe. So we really need to help VC funds to enter into this third, fourth round where they can make those startups grow into big biotech company. And then, you're absolutely right, acquisition will happen, and we will have much more interest for even for Sanofi or recent acquisition. Ablynx or Kiadis in the Netherlands are examples, but we had much more acquisition in the US. I think that the future for us is to look at new biotech going into first, second, third, fourth round, and then because it will be de-risked for us, then we will make our acquisition here.
Christian?
Yes, an experience and a question, you know. I have been doing 20 years with a big pharma, Sanofi, you know, and before and after I have started three incubators, one in France at Pasteur, one in Germany, one in Israel, and I have invested or started 40 companies in France and in Israel mainly. And, if you have a good science first, good people, good patent, you know, it can be successful, but I have made money, I have lost money, and I can say to you, I made statistics, you know, during the last 45 years, you know, and the two parameters which are very, very important to make money for an investor or even a past scientist that as me are for me two. The first one is to have experienced people from pharma industry involved since the beginning, and not people coming with a specific expertise. People having a global view on how to develop a drug since the science to the market, to the reimbursement first. So, and second, to have available money since the beginning, because to accelerate is good, but to do it fast and dirty, it is bad, you know. So you need to be fast and clean, you know. So to have it approved at the end, you know. So how do you think that your different models will answer to those two parameters who made me a rich person or a poor person, you know? So it's very, very important for me, you know.
Christian, I'm sorry, but we exceeded the time. And maybe just one word of conclusion. I think this roundtable was very important in this context of HTID, because it's really what in the future, what you are doing in terms of cluster, helping companies to mature. This will fuel the future HTID. I think we have at this forum, we have the investors able to help more maturation and allow European company to stay and to grow in Europe, up to the commercialization, up to partnership, but partnership at a later stage. So we thank you all. It was a pleasure, and thank you for joining us so early in the morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.